In the heart of rural Texas, nestled amidst miles of barren farmland and forsaken woods, there was a place that most dared not speak of. This was a place tainted by a name that sent shivers down the spines of anyone who knew it, a name whispered in fear: the Texas Chainsaw Killer. Legend had it that the Texas Chainsaw Killer was born in darkness and raised in a world of cruelty. His real name, lost to time, was replaced by a title that struck fear into the hearts of those who heard it. No one knew who he once was, and it didn't matter. He had become a force of pure malevolence, a creature who lived only to cause pain and suffering. The townsfolk kept their distance from the decrepit farmhouse where the Chainsaw Killer was rumored to reside, far away from prying eyes. It was a place where the winds carried secrets and the air itself seemed to wither in despair. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the world became cloaked in shadows, the eerie hum of a chainsaw would pierce the stillness. It was the sound of terror itself, a bone-chilling symphony that sent those who heard it into a state of dread. Those who dared to venture too close to the farmhouse or strayed from the beaten path through the woods would often never return. Their disappearances were marked only by an unsettling silence that loomed like a dark cloud over the town. No one wanted to acknowledge the horrors that unfolded in that forsaken place. The legend spoke of a grotesque family that dwelled within the walls of the farmhouse, twisted by the Chainsaw Killer's malevolence. They were his kin, bound by blood, but also by a macabre devotion to their vile patriarch. Their eyes had lost all trace of humanity, replaced with madness and cruelty. Each member of the family had a role in the gruesome rituals that occurred within the farmhouse. The butcher, a massive and hulking figure, would dismember the victims with a sadistic glee, while the torturer, a gaunt and ghostly figure, reveled in inflicting pain beyond imagining. The matriarch, a deranged and decrepit woman, presided over the atrocities, her eyes hollow and her heart black as night. The Chainsaw Killer himself, a towering and monstrous figure, was said to wear the stitched-together faces of his victims as a mask. His eyes gleamed with a madness that defied description, and his weapon of choice, the chainsaw, was an extension of his own malevolence. He would chase down his prey through the labyrinthine halls of the farmhouse, the roar of the chainsaw echoing in the darkness as he closed in for the kill. Despite the horrors that transpired behind those walls, the town lived in a state of paralyzed fear, unable to confront the evil that lurked in their midst. The Texas Chainsaw Killer and his family continued their reign of terror, hidden from the eyes of the world. One night, a group of college students on a road trip found themselves stranded on the outskirts of the town, their car sputtering to a stop. They had thought the town was just a pit stop on their journey, but now they were stuck, in the dead of night, with no hope of getting help until morning. As they walked down the road, they spotted the dilapidated farmhouse in the distance, the sound of a chainsaw humming in the air. The bravest of the group, a young woman named Mia, felt compelled to investigate. She told her friends to stay behind, but they refused to let her go alone. They approached the house cautiously, their hearts pounding in their chests as the sound of the chainsaw grew louder. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, wearing a mask made of human skin. It was the Texas Chainsaw Killer himself, and he had caught them trespassing on his land. The group scattered, each trying to find a way to escape, but the Chainsaw Killer was quick, and he hunted them down with his beloved weapon. Mia was the last one standing, her body trembling with fear as the Chainsaw Killer closed in on her. But as he lifted his weapon to strike, something within her snapped. She reached within herself and found a strength she never knew she had, and in a swift moment, she disarmed the Chainsaw Killer, grabbing hold of his weapon and turning it on him. The sound of the chainsaw filled the air, drowning out all other noise as the two battled in a dance of death. In the end, it was Mia who emerged victorious. She stood over the fallen Chainsaw Killer, his grotesque mask lying at her feet. The townsfolk had gathered at the scene, stunned by what they had witnessed. It was then that Mia knew that she had a duty to end the reign of terror once and for all. She took up the chainsaw, determined to rid the world of the evil that had plagued it for far too long. With a fierce determination, she led the charge into the farmhouse, her friends and the townsfolk following close behind. The family members fought back, but Mia and her allies were relentless, their weapons striking true as they cut down the twisted creatures that had once lurked within the shadows. The matriarch fell first, her body crumpling to the ground with a sickening thud. The butcher and torturer fought on, but they too were no match for the fury of the group. In the end, only the chainsaw killer remained, and Mia approached him with a steely resolve. In a final showdown, she met his chainsaw with hers, the sound of metal on metal ringing through the air. The chainsaw killer was a formidable opponent, but Mia was fueled by a righteous anger that gave her the strength to prevail. With a final swing, she struck the chainsaw killer down, his body falling to the ground in a heap. The townsfolk cheered, their spirits lifted by the defeat of the monster that had haunted them for so long. As the sun began to rise over the horizon, Mia stood victorious, her chainsaw still humming in her hand. She knew that her battle was far from over, that there were other evil beings lurking in the shadows, waiting to be vanquished. But in that moment, as she looked out over the defeated family and the fallen chainsaw killer, she knew that she had made a difference. She had brought justice to a town that had been under the thumb of evil for far too long. With a sense of purpose burning within her, Mia turned to her friends and the townsfolk, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "We have work to do," she said, her voice steady. "But together, we can conquer anything." And with that, they all set about the task of rebuilding their shattered town, knowing that they had a long road ahead of them, but also a newfound sense of strength. Mia had become a hero, a symbol of hope for those who had been oppressed by the chainsaw killer's reign of terror. The town would never forget the horrors that had transpired within its borders, but it would also never forget the bravery of those who had stood up to the darkness and emerged victorious. Mia would become a legend in her own right, a hero to be celebrated for generations to come. The Texas Chainsaw Killer was no more, and the world was a safer place because of it.